Welcome to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. I believe every man has the potential to push past his limits and strive for something greater. Whether you're a former athlete who is looking for what's next, a professional pushing through the daily grind, or someone simply ready to break through life's toughest challenges, if you're ready to step into the pursuit of something more, your pursuit begins now. All right, welcome back to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin, and today we have Ben Utecht joining us. So Ben, before we dive into your story, a few sports questions for you. So first one, like your favorite all-time athlete in your early years.
Man, early years probably would have been a Minnesota Viking, and that would have most likely have been Chris Carter.
Chris Carter, yes.
We grew up going to the Vikings training camps when I was a little kid and just in awe of these professional athletes and getting as many autographs as I can. A lot of good memories.
Shout out to Chris Carter. And he spoke at this Life Surge a few weeks ago. I know Tim Tebow speaks at it. And one highlight playing for the Minnesota Gophers. I know there's probably many highlights.
It was probably my breakout game my sophomore year against the Wisconsin Badgers. And I had probably the greatest college game of my career. 2 massive touchdowns, a 75-yard touchdown, and then a 45-yard touchdown. And it was after that game that Glenn Mason basically told the world that he has the best tight end in the country. And so that was a launching pad for my career as a college player.
Wow, Glenn Mason right there. Lifting you up and your credibility, but just for to get noticed. So I appreciate that. Appreciate Glenn Mason.
Yeah, I know. He gave me an opportunity as a young kid from a small river town in Hastings, Minnesota, who performed well enough at a football camp the summer after my junior year to give me a verbal offer. And so I owe Glenn Mason a lot.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you, Glenn Mason, again. One highlight play in professional football. Like I said before, there's probably many highlights. So what's maybe
real quickly, I'll go first NFL game I started against the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday night kickoff. And third quarter rolled around and ran a seam route down the middle of the field. The safety messed up the coverage, left me wide open. Peyton saw it, hit me back shoulder, ran over the safety, scored a touchdown in my very first NFL appearance. And as I'm getting off the ground and off the safety, I realized it was Deion Sanders. My first touchdown pass was from a Hall of Fame quarterback, and I ran through a Hall of Fame defensive back. And so pretty special. And then I would say the last game of my career in Indianapolis, or not last game, but towards the end of my career, winning a Super Bowl and having a couple opportunities to catch passes in that game that were meaningful. And so that was such a special moment.
I appreciate you sharing that. So let's get right into your background in early years. Tell us about your experience. I know you grew up like in Rochester. I think you spent a few years, and then Lindstrom. Then eventually you made your way to Hastings, Minnesota. And what were some of kind of the highlights and challenges along your journey, especially 3 different communities? You have to meet some friends, and then especially being the son. I believe your father was a Methodist minister.
Yeah, so in the Methodist church, traditionally, at least when I was growing up, every 5 to 6 years, pastors would move to another congregation. And so we started off in Rochester and then made our way up to the Chisago Lakes, Lindstrom area, and then down into Hastings. And that's when my parents asked, this is where we want to stay until our children, myself and my sister, get through high school. And they respected that. So we got to stay in Hastings until we went off to college. So that was I think a really good move for my family. But it was just normal. And the moving happened in between going to the next level in school. So from elementary to middle school, we made the Hastings move. And so Hastings is really home and was a thriving community, a thriving sports community that really gave me the opportunities that I had. My senior class had 5 male athletes go full ride scholarship to the University of Minnesota for hockey, basketball, and myself for football. So it was a great community to grow up in.
Yeah, you don't hear that too often where one school, that many Division I athletes go on participated at Division I school, so that's pretty remarkable in Hastings. They have 5 in 1 year.
Yeah.
And then you talked about, I know earlier, about at 16 years of age, you attended a Glen Mason camp and you received a offer to play for the Gophers. So what was that moment like for you, and how did it shape kind of your confidence and future path?
It was pretty shocking. I was a wide receiver. We ran an option offense, so never threw the ball. I maybe caught 10 to 12 passes a year. Thankfully, they were all highlights because of our play action options. And when I went to the camp, I just outperformed everybody. And I was fast and I was tall. And because of that performance at the end of the camp, they asked my dad and I to stay after and come into Coach Mason's office. And that's when he offered the scholarship. And I didn't grow up with much. My parents' combined wealth was very small. We always lived in a church parsonage, so we never owned our own home. And I think it was such a gift for my parents. I remember telling my mom, and she just crumbled to the floor, just overwhelmed with emotion, as you can imagine, because how would they put their kids through college? And so that was a pretty emotional time, and such a blessing to have someone like Glen Mason believe in me, and it worked out.
And that was was it after you're into your junior year when you kind of made a commitment to?
Yeah, after my junior year, I was still 16. I was a summer birthday, so June 30th, and the camp was middle of June. I think that it was a shock to me, my family, probably to the community and the state too. It came out of nowhere. Even though I was a talented player, the all-state receivers were catching 60, 70, 80 balls. I caught 10. But again, right place at the right time and the right champion. And that was Glen Mason and the Minnesota Gophers.
So once you began at the University of Minnesota, what were some of the biggest lessons you can share with the listeners, both on the field and in the classroom at the University of Minnesota?
Glen Mason was really intentional about themes. I remember a theme was "Don't Blink." And that really revolved around taking every opportunity that you have as seriously as possible, because they can be fleeting. And also, you got to take respect in football. No one's going to give it to you. You got to take it from people. And you do that by playing mistake-free, efficient, physical football. And that's what he created with our run game, which was one of the top games in the country, along with, I think, what turned out to be a pretty good passing game as well. So in the classroom, Minnesota is a massive university, right? It's 40 to 50,000 students that spans across 2 cities. And so you learn a lot of resilience. You learn how to learn and adapt within large classrooms. And again, the same type of practice that you put onto the football field is what you have to bring into any of those classrooms. Not that I always did that to the best of my ability, but that's what school and sports are supposed to do, is challenge you and give you life lessons that can improve your living moving forward.
So moving ahead with the University of Minnesota, with the Gopher football team, in 2003, you were the first team all Big Ten tight end, and then you were also the team captain. And just share with the listeners, what did leadership look like for you at that time, and how did it prepare you for life after college?
Yeah, I remember going into that senior season and just deciding that it was my time to be more vocal. I think I had put in the work, and I had put in the effort to perform at a high level and earn the respect of my teammates. And so I just really started to step out. John Maxwell says leadership is influence. And I think that my platform at that time had finally given me the influence that's needed to be elected a captain. And so I was very blessed to have that election and to have that role on the team. And it did. It put me into a position where you have to be consistent through the highs and through the lows. It's a long season. It's a physically demanding season. And so I think leadership in football is at its best when it's consistent, so that when you're at the high, you can bring balance. When you're in the valleys, you can raise people up. And that's something that I've experienced at every level, especially under Tony Dungy.
Walk us through the journey. I know you were injured your senior year, and just walk us through that journey of eventually you playing for the Indianapolis Colts and Tony Dungy. He's a former Gopher alumni. And so let's start with that, and then we'll talk about playing more for the Colts and kind of Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning.
Dungy's my miracle story. He's been an amazing coach, a dear friend, and a mentor. And he was the reason that I even made it to the NFL. I sustained a horrific injury my senior year, tore my abs from both sides of the pubic bone, and it was the end of my career. And I was preseason All-American, and I was up for the Mackey Award, which is the nation's top tight end award, and all of that just disappeared. I went undrafted because I was too much of a health risk. So I went from being a potential first rounder to not getting drafted at all, and honestly thought that my career was over. And about 2 months before the NFL draft day, I spoke at a University of Minnesota alumni event, and I got to open for Tony Dungy. And I got up in front of about 700 alumni and just said, "Hey, coach, if you really care about the University of Minnesota, you're going to draft me in the upcoming draft." And he was gracious enough to respond when he took the stage and just said, "Ben, we drafted a tight end in the first round last year, so we're not looking for tight ends this year." And then he stepped back from the podium and he paused and he put his hand on his chin and then came back to the microphone and said, "You know what? If for some reason you slip through the cracks, if for some reason you don't get drafted, I promise I'll be the first person to call." And everybody clapped. It was a thoughtful thing to say, but the chances were slim. So I don't get drafted. And I'm walking into my agent's office 2 months later, and all that's left is the free agent market, the leftovers, the guys that rarely make a team. And about 5 seconds after the free agent market opens, the phone rings in the middle of my agent's desk, and it's Tony Dungy, first person to call. And he said, "Ben, we know how talented you are when you're healthy. We've also dealt with this injury in the past. So we want you to be a Colt. We're going to send you to the top surgeon in the country. We don't even want you to play the first year. Just get better. And we'll pay you as though you're a playing rookie. And here's a little signing bonus just to let you know that we care." And a year later, I'm completely healed, and I get to start in the Sunday night NFL kickoff. And I remained a starter on that team, and we won a Super Bowl in 2006. I owe pretty much everything about my NFL career to Tony Dungy. And really everything I'm doing now in business comes out of what Tony taught me. Pretty special.
Yeah, that is special. And he is not only a sought-after speaker, his legacy is going to live on, and just the impact he's made on so many, I think just not just players, but so many others that have heard him speak, read his books. Share with us what stands out most about, you shared a lot about Tony Dungy, but playing with Peyton Manning, but also playing for the Colts and winning a Super Bowl.
I think that the thing that stands out the most is the dedication to excellence. There was a quote as you walked into the locker room that said, "No excuses, no explanations." And that was Tony Dungy's quote. It actually continues in one of his books as "No excuses, no explanations. The only way to win is through execution." And they really demanded perfection. That was the goal. The goal was to play perfect. And everybody bought into that. And it's a lot easier when you have guys like Peyton Manning who, arguably came as close to perfect as a quarterback so many times. And that drive towards excellence elevates everybody else on the field. And his dedication to preparation and his dedication to leading, also not just playing football, but being a leader on the field, all of those things really is what I think created such a talented and successful team, especially in 2006.
You were made for more clarity, more confidence, more impact. At Maupin Coaching, I help high school and college athletes master the mental game and guide men into purpose-driven leadership. Grab the sports book, rock that merch coming soon, and step into more at maupincoaching.com. And in 2006, that's when I think you won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, that's when we beat the Bears, 41 in Miami.
So was there like highlights? Most don't get experience. Maybe they'll watch the Super Bowl on television or maybe go to the game, but not to actually experience it like you did as a player.
Yeah, it was magical. Your family is there. You're running through all sorts of memories from the past that bring you to this pivotal moment in time in your life. And the kickoff happens, and we practiced all week. Don't kick the ball to Devin Hester, the most dangerous return man in the history of football. And we have the best kicker in the NFL, Adam Vinatieri. And he kicks it to Devin Hester. And Devin Hester runs it 100 yards back for a touchdown on the very first play. And I remember freaking out inside thinking, man, this is not how it's supposed to happen on the first play. And I remember looking to my right and seeing Coach Dungy paying no attention to what just happened. He's just calm as can be, quiet strength the whole way through, preparing for the offense to take the field. I look to my left, and there's Peyton Manning talking to the offensive coordinator, paying no attention to the celebration. They're just calm as can be, talking about the first 3 to 5 plays that we were going to start the game with. And I was put back at rest, and we went out and played Colts football, mistake-free, efficient football, and we ended up being the victors.
Now, what an incredible experience to kind of look to your left and right, and you have Tony Dungy, the coach, the head coach, being such an amazing example, and then Peyton Manning, just calm. And what just happened? It's, hey, next play.
Yep.
Okay, we got to focus on what we, like you said, what the Colts do, Colts football.
100%. I think that sometimes people get nervous. Even as parents, I've got 4 talented daughters that play sports, and you can feel this pressure to be overbearing and to be too demanding. But there's a quality that comes out of the human condition when you challenge people the right way. Not the toxic way, but when you challenge people the right way and you inspire them to be the best that they can and to do the best that they can and to not accept that they're incapable of that level of potential. And that's what the environment was all about. And so it just drove people to be the best. And not that any game was perfect, but man, there were a lot of games that had a lot of perfect plays. And those perfect plays over a long season amounted into the greatest championship that you can win in the sport of football.
All right. Appreciate you sharing that. It's pretty humbling. And just to kind of hear that from 2 players, the coach and player that you played for, Tony Dungy, but the Colts organization, but also Peyton Manning. Hey, during this storm, hey, we're going to be calm. We're going to play that Colts football. So
yes,
appreciate you sharing that with the audience members. And I think they're going to get a lot of takeaways from that. Leading just toward the end of your NFL career, injuries I know are part of the game, but you faced your share in both college and NFL. How did the kind of knee injuries and concussions impact you, not only as an athlete, but as a man going forward?
It's all perspective. It's all perspective, and it's all identity. Where is your identity when you're going through the injuries? And thankfully, having grown up in a strong faith family, my identity was in something bigger than myself. And that really settled my emotions, because I was trusting that there was a plan. I was trusting that there was a story that was being written outside of my control. And that was something I think that really helped me get through those injuries, because suffering can produce some incredible fruits: patience and perseverance, endurance and hope and resilience and courage. And not that I did it perfectly, not that there weren't times going through a number of those injuries where I didn't doubt and I didn't question, but I always had this foundation that told me, this is an opportunity for you to be better. This is an opportunity for you to improve your human condition. And that's even coming out of career-ending injuries like concussions and having to move on and rediscover. But at the end of the day, it's okay, because I believe that my identity is more than just a football player, and that my impact can be greater than just a touchdown.
And then after the NFL, as we move forward, you made your move to Nashville, Tennessee. And I have actually 2 daughters that are in Nashville, Tennessee. Yes. Tell us about your leap into music, producing like 6 albums, singing for 2 presidents, even receiving a Dove Award nomination.
Yeah, it's my fun little hidden secret. My dad was a vocal music major before going into ministry. My mom was a singer. I grew up in a house that celebrated athletics and the arts. And I took it seriously. And I was discovered, believe it or not, while I was playing in the NFL, and I was able to sign a record deal in Nashville. And my degree was also public speaking, which I have a huge passion for, and I do full time now. And so I knew that I was going to launch those two careers. And we spent 3 years, almost 3 years in Franklin, Tennessee. My two middle children, my two identical twin girls, were born in Franklin, Tennessee. My oldest daughter just committed as a 16-year-old on a full volleyball scholarship to Lipscomb University in Nashville. They should be beating up on Belmont this year, just since I can see you wearing the shirt. But we love Nashville, a lot of dear friends. And that was there's nothing like getting on stage, Roger, and people just stereotyping you and just generalizing what they've experienced out of the singing professional athlete, right? And so what happens is the bar gets set really low. And so it's always fun to go out and to show people, what it's like to experience somebody who's taken this seriously as a craft and who's been trained. And I always love that because you can just see their eyes get big and their smiles get big. And you know that you've made an impact through lyrics and through melody.
Are you still continuing on with, I know eventually you left Nashville and then moved back to the city. Are you still producing or recording like any albums going forward, or?
I am doing music, but much less. I've developed a successful Christmas show here in Minnesota that we do every year with a 16-piece orchestra, and it's a beautiful show, and we sell tickets really well. But that's pretty much it. Music is a tough business. It is really challenging, and as our family was growing, my speaking career was taking off. My business career was taking off, so we just started to focus on that lane.
Let's now go into, I know you've had some incredible honors. I know 2013, I believe you had the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance Ambassador Award, and then 2014, the Public Leadership and Neurology Award, and then in 2019, what an honor. Wow, all these are the Tony Dungy Uncommon Leader Award. What do these recognitions mean to you personally, and can you kind of explain that to the audience?
Career ended due to concussion. I became a national spokesperson on concussion for the American Academy of Neurology, which is one of the most prestigious neurology associations in the world. I've got to testify in Congress, got to partner with the NFL Players Association to improve player health and safety. And so those awards mean a lot because it's a group of specialists that are recognizing how your communication skills and your storytelling ability is able to influence people to take their brain more seriously and to continue donating to brain research to find cures for brain disease. So those are very special. And then the Uncommon Leader Award, it's kind of hard to put into words. That came as a huge shock. It's gone to a lot of incredible people like Peyton Manning and Fox Sports anchor James Brown, and the list goes on and on. And so to be included in that group was very humbling. And Tony said, look, it's not about an award that just goes to A-listers. It's about an award that goes to men that are trying to live an uncommon way and to do things and to lead through an uncommon lens. And so that was very affirming to me, because everything I do now is about transforming organizational culture and pouring into people and pouring into the businesses that provide for so many of these individuals and families. And so how do we use our influence and leadership styles to create a culture that truly allows people to feel like they have purpose and value and significance?
And that kind of leads into your current ventures. I know that you're a chief culture officer, business speaker, and then you've also author of 2 books. And how those roles allow you to keep making an impact today? Can you share about these ventures?
Yeah, it started with my passion and gift of speaking. I got my dad as a pastor, got to see him use words to positively transform people. And I thought, man, I want to do that. And when I retired, my first question was, what's my story? And I couldn't get past this profound impact that Dungy had on my life and on the team. His belief was if you build better men, you get better football players. that culture doesn't have to be subjective. It can be an objective system, like any game plan. You can practice in order to develop yourself. And that you're always going to have a culture, whether by design or default. So why not design it? And that realization is what really captivated me towards bringing that perspective out of a championship locker room and into organizations to help them build championship culture. And so my recent book, The Champion's Creed, is a deep dive in my experience through inspiring and motivating people towards the importance of culture into the role of Chief Culture Officer, which gave me the ability to grow as an operationalist of culture. Now I've got the inspirational and the motivational and a better understanding of the operational side of culture and how you actually implement that in consistently in business. And so that's been just awesome. I'm so excited. The book did very well. And the speaking is really starting to expand and to grow. And so excited to see what the future holds for that.
I have a copy of your book at the men's night.
All right.
Where you spoke. So I highly recommend everyone, all the listeners out there, not just as one book, go get both books. So
thank you.
I appreciate that. And now turning to more like I know you talked about really growing up, your dad being a minister and just how important your faith was. Share with the listeners your faith journey and how your walk with Christ guided you through, like you've shared a little bit, through some kind of success and challenges. I know you shared some through this podcast, but you can share maybe another story or two.
Yeah, my story is a young Christian's story. I gave my life to the Lord at a young age, and I think a big part of that was because my parents did such a good job of bringing the ministry home. And I think you might hear of the stereotype, around pastors' kids, where you might experience more rebellion than commitment. And I'm not 100% sure why that is, but I can tell you from my perspective, my dad, the way he led in church was the way he led at home. And so I got to see my parents have a very successful marriage, and how they approached developing my sister and I was thoughtful. And that experience, I think, drew me towards faith. And then, like any faith journey, you go on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. And a lot of things went very well for me very quickly as I went into college. And would be lying if pride and arrogance and entitlement weren't temptations of mine. Always there, always challenging my behavior as a Christian athlete. And that was quite the journey to be on. But again, remember, the Lord always used injury in my life to teach me surrender. So it's almost like every time I would start to veer off, injury, right? Every time I would start to behave in a manner not reflective of my faith, injury. And it was always like he was bringing me back down to reality, just to say, don't forget who you are. Don't forget what you believe in. Don't forget that you're called to practice that belief and obedience. And it was in that journey that I met my wife, who captained the women's golf team at the University of Minnesota. We met through Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Just a unbelievable woman, academic All-American, Miss Minnesota 2005. So I definitely married up, Roger. I outpunted my coverage big time.
You've been blessed, my man.
Amazing woman, amazing mom. And God brought her into my life at the right time. And to have that support system going into the NFL and obviously experiencing more injuries, but having that foundation and being surrounded by people that have the same faith platform and support was just such an answer to prayer, really. And we're trying to continue that legacy that my parents had instilled within us, those seeds that were planted, and planting those seeds into our daughters as well. Because I've got 4 marriages that are going to come up at some point.
You got 4 daughters.
I'm not really looking forward to that. I'm not really thinking about boys right now. Otherwise, I get mad. I don't want to get mad.
I like some key words you talked about: surrender and obedience. I think those are people surrender to all different kinds of things, and surrender to Him and be obedient. I love that. All right, Ben, with wrapping this up, just kind of final question for you. What are kind of a few thoughts you would like to leave with men listening today as you continue on their kind of personal or professional journey?
Oh man, we could do a whole podcast on, on those answers. I'm just going to go with a couple of themes that just, come into my mind and onto my heart. And I think, one is, to be men of integrity. And it's a value principle that's tossed around a lot, especially in corporate America, but it's so critical, right? Because the definition of integrity is honest and to do the right thing. And I think that is something that's really important for men, because oftentimes, whether it's at home as the husband and as the father, you are seen and looked at through the lens of leadership. And it's not always easy to be honest with people. Psychologist Jordan Peter says it's, in fact, the hardest thing for a human to do is to be truly honest, right? I think it's something we need to strive towards. And then I think, secondly, a word that I've been talking a lot about is authentic, right? True to who you are, knowing your identity and stepping into the fullness of your own non-negotiable belief system, and then dedicating yourself to practicing that, to holding yourself accountable, to be authentic. That was one of the greatest things I took away from Tony Dungy was his authenticity. What you see is what you get. He is who he is, no matter who he's talking to or what community he's a part of.
And people want to see that. They want to see people. I think they connect with people that are authentic. That somebody, they use the word real or authentic, or just, they're not trying to be somebody else.
Well, you can trust an authentic person. You can trust authenticity because there's nothing hidden.
That's so good. And I know, like in sports, it's about the team, but it first starts with you.
100%.
What kind of teammate are you going to be, or what kind of father are you going to be? What kind of husband you're going to be. So I appreciate that. All right, Ben, I want to thank you for your willingness to share on this podcast. And where can listeners find you and follow you?
I'm a very accessible guy. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, so please check me out on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. Also through my website, benutechtspeaks.com. You'll learn everything about my corporate platform, my speaking. Having just produced my new speaker reel, it's on the site now, and it's just awesome. So please check those out. Also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But LinkedIn is primarily where I spend most of my time.
All right, that's a wrap with Ben Utecht, and I want to thank you for being part of Men Pursuing More podcast.
Thank you, Roger.
Hey, thanks for listening to Men Pursuing More podcast. Don't forget to follow us at maupincoaching.com.